It all started with a chill, something strange in the air that nobody could explain. It wasn't cold or hot, it was a sense of unease, something different about the way the wind moved, the way the sky felt a little too heavy, like it was holding a secret. For weeks, people had been hearing rumors about strange occurrences. Missing pets, odd behavior from loved ones, small cracks in their everyday lives that made them feel like they were walking on eggshells. It was Jason, a young journalist, who first noticed something was wrong. He lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere, but even here, things were starting to feel off. He began with his work, as usual, doing the rounds for local news. But the closer he looked at his neighbors, the more he began to feel the weight of the strange presence growing. One day, he ran into Linda, his childhood friend. They hadn't spoken in months, but when she waved at him from across the street, he smiled and walked over. She looked different. Not drastically, but enough that it caught his attention. Her face seemed softer, her eyes colder, and her smile wasn't quite right. But when he asked if something was wrong, she brushed it off. "I'm fine, Jason. You should just take it easy." "Things are fine here," she said, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling. Her voice, her mannerisms, they were off. It was like she was trying too hard to appear normal. As days passed, he observed more odd behavior, not just from Linda, but from others around town. The patterns were clear, people were acting strange. The subtle differences weren't noticeable at first, but once Jason began to pay closer attention, the cracks became undeniable. Then came the night he couldn't ignore it anymore. His neighbor, Mr. Calloway, had always been a quiet, grumpy old man. But that night, Jason saw him walking around the yard with a blank expression, muttering to himself. He was walking in strange patterns, almost like he was rehearsing something. Jason approached him cautiously, but as soon as Mr. Calloway turned his head to greet him, Jason felt his stomach drop. His eyes weren't human anymore. They were black, as though the life had been drained out of them. Jason had no idea what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure: whatever it wasn't normal. Jason didn't sleep that night. His mind raced with what he had witnessed. The next morning, he decided to go deeper. He started with Linda again. This time, he tried a different approach. He asked her about her family, about her life, trying to find something that would feel real. But the answers she gave were rehearsed. She didn't know how to answer simple questions without sounding like she was reading from a script. It wasn't until Jason's phone rang that things started to make sense. It was an encrypted message from an unknown source, a voice he didn't recognize. "They are coming," it said. "Don't trust anyone. Not even your own shadow." The line went dead. Desperate for answers, Jason turned to Dr. Helena Marks, an expert in extraterrestrial phenomena, someone he had interviewed years ago but hadn't seen since. Her reputation for conspiracy theories made most people dismiss her, but Jason had no choice. He needed someone who might know what was going on. When he explained what he had been observing, Dr. Marks didn't hesitate. "Shapeshifters," she said, as if the word was something everyone should know. "They've been among us for centuries. But they're getting bolder now. They feed off our emotions, our fears. They've learned to blend in, hide in plain sight. The invasion is happening right under your nose." At first, Jason didn't believe it. But then, the pieces started to fall into place. The odd behavior, the strange eyes, the feeling of being watched, it all made sense now. These were not just unusual people. They were imposters, creatures who had learned to take on human form. They were here, living among them, waiting for the right moment to strike. The worst part: they were not just after Jason, they were after everyone. His friends, his family, his neighbors, no one was safe. The real humans were being replaced, one, by these shapeshifters. Jason's only choice now was to find a way to expose them before it was too late. The days following his conversation with Dr. Marks were filled with panic and uncertainty. Jason knew he had to act fast, but the task was enormous. How do you expose something as dangerous and elusive as a shapeshifter, especially when they could look like anyone? He decided to team up with a small group of survivors who had also started to notice the strange occurrences around town. They were skeptical at first, but after Jason showed them undeniable proof, videos, photos, and first-hand experiences, they were all in. Together, they began to unravel the mystery. They learned that the shapeshifters had a weak point: they couldn't mimic human behavior perfectly. There were always little inconsistencies, small gestures, reactions that didn't match the situation. It was like they couldn't completely understand the depth of human emotion, so they mimicked it poorly. With this in mind, they set up a plan. They began testing the people in their community, creating situations that would force the shapeshifters to react in ways that were unnatural. They used fear, sadness, even anger, all emotions that humans experienced daily, but that the shapeshifters couldn't replicate perfectly. And with each test, the truth became more and more obvious. But as they got closer to revealing the shapeshifters, the group was ambushed. Jason barely escaped with his life, but many of his friends didn't make it. The shapeshifters had caught on to their plan and retaliated viciously. Now, Jason knew that it wasn't just about saving the town, it was about surviving long enough to warn the rest of the world. In the end, Jason realized that exposing the shapeshifters wasn't enough. The world had to be prepared for what was coming. He had to find a way to stop them before they could spread beyond the town. With his last breath, Jason managed to broadcast a warning to the world. The fight wasn't over, but the first step had been taken. Humanity now knew the truth: the shapeshifters had arrived, and they wouldn't stop until they had taken over everything.